Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays for Smash Ultimate. Last video we covered Piranha Plant, who more or less sat in around mid to low tier ever since release. For this episode, I want to discuss a fighter who, despite being rated very highly by the community, sees little representation in the competitive scene, at least in the West. She's fielded more often in Japan, but for the most part it's a far cry from her dominance back in Smash 4. So for today, let's talk about why no one plays Sheik. If this is your first time on the channel, I'd like to make a quick disclaimer that this video is not meant to be a personal attack against any Sheik player. I'm not trying to make fun of you or your main. The goal of Why No One Plays is to discuss characters who are unpopular to use by the general player base, analyzing from the viewpoint of those who don't play them what about them turns people away from trying them out, and possibly highlighting the aspects about them that might be appealing to some of you. With that said, let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Historically, Sheik has always been viewed as the stronger of Zelda's two personas. During Melee and Brawl, they were two halves of the same whole, swapping between and utilizing their different playstyles in the hopes that they could cover each other's weaknesses and augment each other's strengths. But with Zelda's kit being virtually unusable, most players would often exclusively stay on Sheik, as the latter's high mobility and rapid attacks were much more practical over anything the former had to offer in almost every situation. Smash 4 was the first title where the two are now completely separate entities, replacing the transformation special into Phantom Slash for Zelda and Bouncing Fish for Sheik respectively. In Sheik's case, the severance not only granted her with a new special move, but it also unshackled her from the balance limitations of being two characters. As a result, she was widely considered one of the best fighters during the early days of Smash 4, if not the best, before being asked to from that position following a series of nerfs and the eventual advent of Bayonetta and Cloud. Despite that, she was still an extremely dangerous contender towards the tail end of Smash 4's lifespan, and like other top tiers, her transition to Ultimate came at the cost of even more nerfs, designed to narrow her margin for error and cement her role as the glass cannon to end all glass cannons. Anyone who's played Smash for a while is well aware of what she's known for. In terms of speed, Sheik has the undisputed best overall frame data in the entire game, with virtually all of her normals having startup times in the low single digits. In fact, barring her smash attacks and down air, all of her non-special moves come out at frame 5 or less, allowing her to outpace even rushdown fighters like Mario, Pikachu, and Fox, at least in the air. Most of her grounded and aerial attacks can be difficult to punish by virtue of their low ending lag as well, to the point where a lot of fighters can only rack up damage against her through stray hits or hard reads as opposed to whiff punishes or on shield. Alongside having the best attack speed among the cast, Sheik has also some of the best physics in the game, both in the ground and the air. Her thin frame and frequent hurtbox compressions make her very difficult to hit as well, and she can traverse even large stages faster than 90% of the roster, so she's very adept at getting hits on you while avoiding getting hit herself. Generally, when it comes to rushdown or hit and run archetypes, their primary weakness is their lack of range, either due to small hitboxes or lack of disjointed attacks such as swords or projectiles. Sheik doesn't really struggle with pressuring from a distance though. On top of her high speed, she comes equipped with Needle Storm, her neutral B, a chargeable projectile that she can store up for later use or throw immediately. And they have Transcendent property, or in other words, you can't challenge them with projectiles of your own. Your only option is to shield or avoid them. This makes her one of the few close quarters combatants who has the option to camp out her opponents, a playstyle that can change to rushdown at a moment's notice, and that's a luxury not many others have, since anyone with a similar long distance projectile like Mario or Pikachu have nowhere near the same kind of mobility. These attributes coalesce together to form a high-risk, high-reward fighter with a very strong neutral game and advantage state. She has almost limitless mix-up potential, especially now with Gamer's new Slingshot. With that much speed and access to a projectile, you're able to get quick hits in and run out over the course of a match. Speaking of quick hits, Sheik's combo game is near impossible to challenge once she builds momentum. Any one of her attacks on the ground or the air can lead into a string of sometimes a dozen hits that carry you from anywhere on the stage off stage, where she can exercise her plethora of edge guarding tools to close out your stock. Her disadvantage is nothing to scoff at either. Any move that comes out frame 4 or earlier can usually serve as a reliable combo breaker, which means 3 out of 4 of her aerials are fair game at stopping less than true combos. Moreover, Bouncing Fish and Vanish give her plenty of options to recover back on stage if she does get thrown off, so you have to take her down the old-fashioned way. Essentially, if handled perfectly with no mistakes, Sheik is the definitive best character in the game. She has the most ideal combination of speed and frame data, bar none, and her specific array of tools gives her an advantage against every prevailing archetype. Against brawlers, well, she has the fastest moves, so in theory she should win every single time. Against swordies, she can ignore their range advantage in theory by squeezing between their blind spots using her high mobility. Even the fastest sword fighters like Mythra, Lucina, and Roy are nowhere near fast enough to take her up close. And against zoners, she can match their range pressure with needles, and if she manages to get so much as even one opening against them, in theory, they're screwed. So you might be wondering why I keep saying in theory. The primary reason why Sheik's play rate is so low despite having everything you would want in a Smash character is because of something known as human error. In fighting games, the majority of attacks and actions come out faster than the average human can react to. For reference, the median reaction time for most people is about 200 to 300 milliseconds, and if we go by 60 frames per second, one frame is 16.67 milliseconds, and so the fastest most of you can respond is in the neighborhood of 15 frames. However, that's assuming you're dedicating all of your mental and physical awareness to a single twitch-based reaction, such as pressing a button the moment the screen changes from green to red. You guys know what I'm talking about. There are those reflex tests on the internet that everyone has done at least once. Naturally, in a fighting game like Smash, where there's a lot of things you have to think about, there's no chance you're reacting at optimal speeds. You're probably operating with an average reaction speed of 20 to 25 frames at best. Additionally, the Nintendo Switch console has an innate 6 frames of input delay to process a button press, bringing your reaction to about 30 frames or roughly half a second. Where I'm going with this is that Sheik is the best character in the game, but only if you play her perfectly, as in perfectly react to any and all stimuli you see on screen. With this in mind, most if not all attacks are impossible to react to on sight. Even if you dedicated all of your mind, body, and soul towards timing your shield to come out to block maybe Sheik's forward smash, which I think comes out on frame 12, you can't. Any instance where you manage to is if you press shield before the attack came out, which means you predicted what she would do, not reacted. Most of the time, reactions are discussed from the viewpoint of the recipient. In Mockrock's video on zoners, he had a segment explaining why projectiles are disproportionately buffed online due to the universal decrease in reactability, but it also applies to the sender as well. I mentioned earlier that Sheik's frame data outclasses anyone else in the game, so in a contest of speed, she would win 10 times out of 10. But hypothetically, if we were to pit her neutral air against Fox's, the difference in startup is only 1 frame, 1/60th of a second. You physically cannot react fast enough to throw your attacks out before theirs. In Smash Bros, and by extension every fighting game, players gain the upper hand on their opponents mostly by predicting and guessing their moves, not reacting to them. Even in situations where it looks like they did something in reaction, such as parrying hits, more often than not, they were expecting their opponent to do that ahead of time. It's still a prediction. Why this matters a lot for Sheik is that in true glass cannon fashion, Sheik can't afford to make very many mistakes. She's simultaneously one of the lightest characters in Smash Ultimate and has the lowest damage output per move, causing her to have very polarizing weaknesses alongside her strengths. Despite having good recovery, her actual endurance on stage is very frail. In fact, she's lighter than Kirby, which is saying a lot. In other words, trading blow for blow with your enemy results in a net loss for her almost every time. To elaborate on that, here's Sheik versus Bowser. Theoretically, in this matchup, Bowser should not be able to land a single attack on Sheik no matter what. Most of his moves have more than twice the startup frames, which means Sheik should be able to outpace him throughout the entire match. But just from the first stock alone, notice how many attacks Void lands on Leon in comparison to how many attacks Leon gets in return. Bowser can dish out 100% in 5 to 7 hits, where Sheik has to throw close to 20 to get to that percentage. Also, because she's so light, she dies much earlier than a lot of characters. I understand this is an extreme example, but it illustrates her most glaring flaw. She requires far too much effort and precision relative to the reward. The margin for error on her is narrow as all hell. You have to make less than half the amount of mistakes your opponent does with each stock. In her defense, every glass cannon fighter shares this to some extent, but what they have that she doesn't is damage and kill power. The balance of power and speed is prevailing wisdom in video games. Usually the faster or more accurate you are, the less damage or force is behind your attacks, while the slower you are, the more of a punch you pack with each hit. Heavyweight fighters like Bowser, Donkey Kong, Kazuya, and Ganondorf have far better damage tracking capabilities, with most of their attacks individually dealing well over double-digit damage. This is to account for how much harder it is for them to hit opponents in light of their slower, clunkier moves. Conversely, lightweight fighters like Fox, Pikachu, and Inkling have very fast frame data, but average to below average damage output per hit since they can initiate combos more reliably. Now, that's not to say these guys don't close out stocks early, cause no, they most certainly can. Going back to Sheik, if you go through each of her attacks, you'd be lucky to find any that do more than 10% in a single hit. Having starter frames like 2, 3, and 4 are fantastic, but she also has damage numbers like 2, 3, and 4. Her forward air, for instance, only does 4% on average, neutral air 6%, dash attack 7%, forward tilt 3%, up air 7%. You would have to land well over a dozen moves just to get them above 100%, and even then, her kill power is just as poor as her damage. It's not uncommon for Sheik's opponents to survive in excess of 150% unless she scores a very deep edge guard or gimp. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be too big of an issue since one neutral exchange is a good 40 to 50% for her, but what happens when a fighter is at high percent? They get rage, which increases their kill power. Ideally, you want to finish enemies off at as low of a percentage as you feasibly can to avoid accidentally throwing. Couple this with her frailty and it makes for a character with dangerously high risk and none of the reward. Mind you, she's not entirely without kill setups. Conversions like drag down up air into up smash, a technique that's often referred to as raindrop, and things like needles or forward air into bouncing fish can make for reliable mid-percentage KOs. So if you master your kill confirms, then your superior neutral game would be able to get you into an optimal position to act on those combos. That being said, in last talk last hit situations, you're still at a huge disadvantage. The long and short of it is, she's just too unforgiving to play that you can ironically find more success with a slightly slower character. Early on, a tongue-in-cheek remark people made about her is that she's Joker without Arsene, and that isn't far from the truth. Base Joker plays a lot like Sheik at early percents. The only difference, of course, is kill power and damage. Unfortunately, with how polarizing her strengths and weaknesses are, you can't alleviate either without completely damaging the character's delicate balance and identity. True to her appearance, Sheik is characterized as a ninja, someone who strikes quickly before retreating just as fast. If we were to try to fix her by, say, trading some of her speed for power, that would hurt her more than help her because the only thing that gives her a chance at outperforming her peers is her speed, nothing else. Take that away and she's for all intents and purposes a worse version of, well, everyone. And that goes both ways. If her primary issue is damage output and kill power, wouldn't raising numbers fix everything? That depends on what moves you touch. Sheik is entirely balanced through margin for error. A lot of her attacks have middling to low hit stun, requiring the player to have very tight mechanics and execution on her attacks and conversions. Therefore, their base damage and knockback are calculated based on how much time the players have to react to moves connecting. Increasing forward tilt's percentage by 2% or even 1 might send them too far away for it to combo into itself at low percents or confirm into up air at high percents. Increasing theirs damage might send them far enough away to buffer a spot dodge so she can't follow up with a grab, things like that. Direct power increases sound like a good idea on paper, but it can disrupt her already strict combos. Having said that, all of you might be wondering why a lot of players rate her so highly if she's too much of a hassle to play. Well, just because something is theoretical doesn't mean it's not possible to do in practice. You don't have to play Sheik perfectly to be effective. It would be great if you could, but you don't have to in order to find success with her. Like I said, Sheik has everything you would want in a main as a competitor. Good mobility, amazing frame data, strong neutral game, adaptable playstyles, good recovery, high mix-up potential, and a near suffocating advantage state. Yes, you can't make as many mistakes as other characters, but her moveset is engineered to mitigate the likelihood of that happening. She's evasive, so you can dodge a lot of attacks others wouldn't be able to. And many of her own attacks are ridiculously safe on shield, especially her aerials, some of which are literally impossible to punish like forward air, as there's not a single attack that comes out faster than frame 3 out of shield. In that sense, how good Sheik is comes down entirely to how good you are, and empirical data suggests most professional Sheik players can tap into around 80 to 90% of her full capacity. But that's still pretty good. For those of you who saw my tier list video, I put her squarely in top 20, meaning she is viable enough to solo main. That is if you're willing to put in the work to master her. So that's all I have to say for today. What do you guys think about Sheik? Do you think she's perfectly fine where she is, or should she be allowed to have a wider margin for error? Let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my previous episode on Piranha Plant if you haven't yet. For now though, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.